Holler if you hear me, and welcome to tonight's edition of Art Uncensored. It is the top of the hour, 10 p.m. Eastern, and we are here together to go and draw for the first time in a while Lady Death, because, well, why not? And we finally can go and put some use to this little tracing I did from Playboy's book of lingerie, because, well, why not? I mean, I showed this tracing off even to my sister, and she even liked it, so okay, well, let's put this to good use. And I think that is a good pose for a Lady Death, especially considering, I made the rounds to Liberty Comics earlier today, and they actually had a whole little section when it came to indie publishers in their back issue boxes for the one and only Lady Death. And I mean, hey, why not? There's still an audience for that stuff. And, honestly, whatever sort of far-flung, high-concept stories I may or may not have for Encrypted, still, at the end of the day, I mean, what I'm doing is a bad girl comic. So, hey, if I could just have a fraction of that sort of kinship with a Lady Death or with a she, then, the whatever sort of goals I would have with the comic would actually be achieved. So, yeah, there's thinking of that because, yes, every Wednesday I usually go and make my rounds there to see if, anything else is sold or any copies I've sold. And, well, it is proud to say that, yes, my first cut 2 issues, the inventory there have sold out, so that's nice. And I also caught a bit of the embarrassment of seeing the Tigers choke in the bottom of the ninth like that. And also, I actually see now that one of those big, major titles of the 60s era of Marvel that I've been meaning to track down in some form or another of a trade or an omnibus or whatever, well, there is still the omnibus of the John Buscema Stan Lee issues of the Silver Surfer, which are still available. Like they have the omnibus there for sale at Liberty Comics, but also they've been doing those single issue facsimile reprints. Well, now they've been doing them issue by issue of the Silver Surfer. They're now up to, I think, issue 6. And I was like looking at that, looking through it. I mean, I didn't get it, but it was still interesting to look through. And I showed the owner there about how, it reminded me of this Richard Gere movie from the 80s called Breathless, if anybody else besides me has heard of it, where Richard Gere is this like hustler on the run from shooting a cop, and there's a whole like story, his whole storyline parallels his love of the Silver Surfer, and him repeatedly getting Silver Surfer comics at newsstands and all of that, including even how it's supposed to parallel his personal dilemma with running from the police or how he could just run, as well as how much he feels that he'll, how his feelings towards his lady love being like our friend Norrin Rad and his beloved Shah LaBall. And also in the scenes where we show him with the Silver Surfer comics, it's actual, the actual Buscema Lee issues of the Silver Surfer that they're showing pages of and quoting. So that's actually and remember, this was a Hollywood movie in 1983. This was years before even the Howard the Duck movie was in theaters. So there was, when there was comic books were not really a thing at that time, any kind of reference in Hollywood outside of the Superman movie and the Adam West Batman show was an interesting detail to look into to see. And yes, well, we all hope this is a fun night ahead, RJ. And yes, hello to Austin. And yeah, sorry about the Tigers. Yeah, that happens. But then again, the way the Tigers have been playing the last decade or so, I honestly expect it. It doesn't surprise me. It's the opposite of, say, what happened with Michigan in this past men's basketball tournament, where they had been a contender for years and then always choked in the big tournament and during March Madness. But then this year, no, they pleasantly surprised me by not choking and winning their first national title in men's basketball since '89. And the same thing also with Michigan, where the way they're playing and the way that they've got everything going, I'm expecting them to be in that, college football playoff this year. Absolutely, positively. And when it comes to the Surfer, yes, Silver Surfer is a great example of how comics can do things, unique things. Yes, I mean, a silver dude surfing through space is not naturally my thing, but add amazing art and writing, and yes, the Surfer is amazing. Now, like I said, when it comes to the classic, the 60s Marvel stuff that's considered the Stone Cold classics you're supposed to have, I have a good portion of them, but one of those blind spots of mine is I still don't have my hands in Epic Collection form or omnibus form of the John Buscema Stan Lee Silver Surfer from the 60s. that, and also like Daredevil, the like early years of Daredevil, those first 2 years when it first came from whole cloth from its own title. Yeah, that's another one I don't have. But yeah, either in omnibuses or epic collections or some other kind of trade. The Fantastic Four, I've got that Volume 1 omnibus and the epic collection that does have the Galactus and Inhumans and Black Panther issues that is supposed to be like the perfection run, the seminal run of that Kirby Lee era. And of course, the early Thor, yes. The early Hulk, yes. And I'm trying to. I already mentioned Hulk, Spider-Man as well. Yeah, Spider-Man and also Doctor Strange. Between Doctor Strange with the omnibus and Doctor Strange with these little ones that I don't know if they're in print anymore, but yeah, the Marvel Masterwork series was the first real attempt that Marvel did at doing like paperback or hardcover reprints of their classic 60s stuff. And they revived them not too long ago in these smaller, like tabloid-sized editions. And I've got I have the Ditko Doctor Strange stuff both in these two and in the omnibus, so I'm covered. And also the initial 60s X-Men, yeah. The initial Lee Kirby X-Men stuff, I have that too. That's another one of those omnibuses, but it's just Silver Surfer 60s. And and especially considering like the colorful cosmic things I have planned for issues 8 and 9 of Encrypted, I mean that would be something out there, especially considering John Buscema's much more illustrative, more refined way of drawing compared to the deceptively crude of Steve Ditko. I always say deceptively crude because the actual visual storytelling and what goes on in each panel, from panel to panel to panel, and the sheer visual imagination in what is in the panels and how characters look and how they move, very much is why him perpetually going by those, panel grids that look like window panes of 8 or 6 panels usually are a thing he does, but does it beautifully. And all the feckless hacks, that have been coming into Marvel or DC since then, where it's just endless, monotonous, window pane pages of people going on and going on about their gender identities is insufferable. Despite, they despise Steve Ditko's worldview, but like to reuse his potentially monotonous page layouts, which is purely monotonous with them, but not with him. And yes, the Fourth World, which actually I do have in those super duper absolute editions, those slipcase editions, I have those, and the slipcases are designed to look like mother boxes. That is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, the 70s stuff that Kirby did, the majority of it has been collected in omnibuses in some form or another. And yeah, there's just like the DC Universe by Kirby. I have that, which includes all the other stuff he did that was like shorter runs of things, or either his own creations or revamps, like his version of the Sandman, or of course his own creations like OMAC or Commandy, which are in that omnibus, and also issues he contributed to things like The Losers or the DC Superpowers mini comics that came with the DC Superpowers toys by Mattel. Around that same time that they did that with Masters of the Universe, where each Masters of the Universe toy came with a mini comic. And then, of course, also there is, like I mentioned, the Fourth World Absolute Editions. But yeah, I mentioned Thor. The Thor ones, Epic Collections. I do have those of those initial Lee Kirby Thor. Honestly, Ant-Man, like the initial years of Ant-Man, is not exactly something I'm like cramming for or yearning to at least just have. So that one is one where I can know that I can go a while with that, but that's all right. That's all. I'm okay with that. But yeah, that Buscema, Lee, Silver Surfer stuff, and the initial Stan Lee, I think Bill Everett, Daredevil, and then Wally Wood coming in the first 2 issues and changing the costume to the classic all red look. Yeah, that's another one, since Daredevil is one of those top tier characters for me. And also the 60s revival of Captain America. I do have the epic collection of that, where he was still just a recurring character in one of their anthologies. It was the anthology Journey into Mystery that also is where Iron Man debuted, and the comic became half Iron Man, half Captain America for a while. I do have that. Yeah, the Epic Collection that has that, including those fill-in issues that Jim Steranko did with the whole fake Captain America faking his death and Rick Jones becoming his new Bucky, and his day job as a cop, because of his identity being dead now. So now he goes off into a whole new identity, and that's what sets up eventually the decades of him being a freelance artist. And he would go and keep his costume and shield inside one of those large, flat pizza box-looking artist portfolios. And yeah, the Doctor Strange Tales, if you want to really have the experience of seeing other dimensions and other worlds, without just, having as an excuse to get high, you can look at the Ditko Doctor Strange stuff and you can see why, well, even with, aesthetically speaking, better artists, pretty much Doctor Strange, the only stuff worth reading is still the work that Ditko did. Although I have heard good things about when it was Steve Englehart was writing Doctor Strange in his own comic in the 70s. And I know he had Marshall Rogers, who was a great underrated Batman artist who did some stuff in that era. But still, basically what they're doing is just doing the Doctor Strange Ditko stuff with no new creativity of their own beyond maybe, less excessive narration, as Stan Lee was known to do with his with the stuff he would write, and also, prettier pictures. Like, yeah, the nicer artists and all that. And for me, who can't stand the Cal Arts cringe that's been on display at Marvel and DC, I actually still, it's a matter of the imagination, the creativity, and the storytelling in those, and the way Ditko would do Doctor Strange is so much more pleasing than the more visually pretty, like a Marshall Rogers kind of artwork that he would bring to Doctor Strange when he was the artist behind what Steve Englehart was doing as the writer. Like, just look at this, one famous cover, which is a Rogers cover. I'll show you. But when you look at that, I mean, yes, it is very nice. It's got that great use of it's able to make that gray tones with the screen tone look completely psychedelic. And yes, all of that much more refined, much more aesthetic, much prettier. And it's much, although and when it comes to doing it, if you're going to go and do it, like, say, as a portfolio illustration, like if you saw when Michael Golden did that one art portfolio that got published in comic shops, and it included a very minutely rendered, very precisely, beautifully rendered a Doctor Strange piece, but there has to be an actual story imagination behind that too. And, that's where Ditko brought the funk in a way that, well, everyone else is not so funkadelic. And now, even with, him becoming such an overused plot device masquerading as a character with Benedict Cumberbatch in the MCU movies, is still any new attempts at comics since then, because of the heightened profile, because the MCU still just even in bigger storylines where they actually do use him with some creativity or imagination, he's still more of a utility player or as a plot device, instead of it being in a league of his own in his own story, like with his run when Steve Gerber was writing the Defenders and they had Doctor Strange in there, or if you look at, say, his place in the Infinity Gauntlet storyline. But that's about it. And even then, like I said, if you can get that more fancy Marshall Rogers style rendering or visual imagination put into page layouts like this, but apply it to stories that really match that creativity aesthetically, well, then you're styling. Especially when you're dealing with a character where Doctor Strange, the precedent set with the character is the, mystical, it is the imaginative, it is the psychedelic, or at the very least, it's based off of magic and other dimensions and the embodiment of incantations and all that. So a story that, or stories that fit into that work in a way that, say, is not as necessary with, like, looking at 90s bad girl comics, like, say, She, or the 90s revival of Elektra, or, when they tried doing all those, like, top cow female characters from, what was the one? Oh, yeah, Cyberforce, or whatever, or the female characters from Jim Lee's Wildcats or Stormwatch, and spin them off in their own titles, with, like, Velocity, or Sideblade, or what have you, or Zealot, or, even Void. They don't exactly You don't. Those were stories based off of the nice shiny veneer of the Jim Lee Mark Silvestri artwork, and just stringing that together in pages. So having some big profound story or some story with some otherworldly high concepts is not as important. But if you get something where the precedent you set is some story with some high concept, some sort of out there imagination that has some attempt at trying to do a visual, flex or a visual detail that's something that is aesthetically pleasing and aesthetically, eye-catching in a way that does not make it look like the other Marvel or DC fare, which is what I've been attempting to do with Encrypted. And well, at the end of the day, it's not. I've got my aspirations and I've got what I attempt to do, with the goals of what I'm doing with the comic. But it's up to you, the readership, that says yay or nay on whether or not I've actually achieved these goals. On whether or not doing pages like this are things that actually stand out positively, or if they just look stupid. Because remember, unlike what DC or Marvel says these days, it's not what you like, it's the consumer. At least with me, I can say that I'm hanging my balls out there and doing entirely my own thing, my own story. I'm not desperately glomming on to a Marvel or DC and then taking a character or a story or a history of a comic that has nothing to do with me and then making it all about me. That's I can never be accused of that. And also, honestly, in this day and age, why would you want to keep doing that? That's why I'd rather go and be looking up trademark law and what it costs to trademark and what is the process of trademarking and all that, because there is a difference between copyrights and trademarks. Copyrights go specifically for an individual work. Like, when I went to the Copyright Office after this was getting published and printed, and went and, remember, during the most recent government shutdown was when I went and filed to get issue 1 copyrighted. And even though the Copyright offices, it turns out, were closed, even though the website was still up, when I went online to file for the copyright, they still took my $65 to get issue 1 copyrighted. But yes, that's those individual works. Trademarks are specifically for, character names or the logos for a comic and all that. So it would be Encrypted as a whole, and in particular the logo and things like that. Those are separate entities. So yeah, technically, and also on top of that, as soon when it comes to publishing it, you publish it and there it is. It's your thing, it's your property. But that extra legal protection, you go and you get it copyrighted and you get it trademarked. And those are both separate details. And also there are vacillating, price demands or results and steps into how it actually goes. And by that, I mean, do you go on like an official government website, or do you go through one of those LegalZoom kind of, websites or anything like that, or like Trademark Engine? And well, that's the sort of detail you go into and you see, and when you file. And then, you keep, if they send you any physical papers, like what I got when issue 1's copyright was successfully filed, I got an email, but also I went and got a physical letter from the Copyright Office, which I keep in my personal files alongside, important bills and things like that. So that is, you are having those on hand in case of any sort of emergency, or if you just want that, physical proof of, no, here's what I've been doing. That's why, since all the utilities in the house have gone under my name, I avoid any offer of going paperless, because I want that actual physical documentation of showing, here's what I've been doing. But yes, I've been doing it, and there's the cycle, being it on the time. Maybe now you know why my father had such an aversion to paper bills or to keeping that anything physically documented, on account of, a man, for as much as he was obsessed with talking about, button down and all that, well, then why is it that his life was so chaotic, and why he wound up putting his own family into such a tailspin that it took my mother enlisting in the army to dig us out from under that? So yeah, Talk about when somebody reminds me of those lyrics from Motorhead's Bad Religion of "You are the spooks you're chasing." Somebody who constantly would just not stop yammering about my mother being a failure and this and that. When it turns out, no, as I've been saying, when somebody is having such a consistent derangement syndrome against someone like that in their life, then it could be an example, especially when you look at the telltale signs of socio-political narcissism and of such violent, aggressive clap back or lashing out at anybody that challenges them. Then yeah, most definitely it's weapons grade confession through projection. He was the spooks he was chasing, although he wasn't really chasing them because he was so fat and lazy in his remaining years that it was too physically painful, according to him, to simply get off his fat ass and walk down to the Dollar General for anything. Yeah. The kind of guy who I'm suspecting may or may not have been, molesting me in my sleep. Well, he was the guy who was, so damn afraid of God knows what sort of trauma was bouncing around in his memories that he would not ever take a shower, his one shower a week, unless I was leaving the house. And he would always make sure to send me out to go, fetch him something he was too lazy to get by himself, so he could go and shower. Because obviously something that he wouldn't want to disclose. The guy who wouldn't shut up gloating about, dating this Playboy playmate or that Playboy playmate, supposedly, is the man who was too afraid to even have someone in the house in a whole other room while he was there while he showered. But then again, this also is the same man who would tell me the stories repeatedly. The story of, one night there was his mother drunk and naked yelling at him over his bed. And then spontaneously, if I brought that story up, he would start to deny that he ever told me that, even though he was telling me it for years and years and years and years, because, well, that's the kind of that was the kind of man he proved himself to be. The type of guy who would want to tell you that actions speak louder than words, but most of the time all he really had to himself was words. So who the hell is he to talk? Who the hell is he to judge? Absolutely, positively. And it's just a big game, but maybe again, that's why you never really saw him ever in, big games of chess. I'm pretty sure Chinese checkers was something that might have been too complex for him, or something that didn't involve enough of just beating someone down or being able to bully somebody with threats of beating them down. Yeah, basically, if Nelson from The Simpsons had gone onto the football team. But we all know certain things that are true, that are blatantly true, and someone that will also professionally deny all that shit because something is Trump's fault, and he's become their ultimate scapegoat for all their failures. Or not even him. Also look at Charlie Kirk and all those failures as human beings that are doing that drag show that's all mocking Charlie Kirk with some drag queen going on stage with the bloody bullet hole in the throat and the prop blood all over them and all that. If you've seen that, yeah, some Turning Point USA drag show parody. And well, when all those people wind up either dying of AIDS or they die from coming within 5 feet of a Muslim, yeah, let's just say I'll deliver onto them what they delivered onto the world, and I'll laugh in their fucking face as they die painfully and slowly. RJ says, it sounds like growing up was a tough experience. I'm hoping everything is better now. Well, the ultimate victory over someone like that in your life is to notice and acknowledge that everything in your life is better with him being gone. I'm reminded, as much as I hate them now, but I'm darkly reminded of when Matt Stone appeared in Bowling for Columbine, and he was talking about how you'd be surprised, and it's amazing how much you completely lose contact with all of that stuff that goes on in high school, and how much your life is completely different once you get away from that. And well, when it comes to the type of people that are perpetually haunted by their high school experiences, by their bad high school experiences, well, the high school experiences were not the bad thing for me. It was it was having the kind of father I did. That was the nightmare. that's the thing that could potentially either lead to someone either wanted to go and be above and beyond that and do better than they were, or you get the Patton Oswalt or Bill Maher type to whom the entire nexus of their identity is they were not popular in high school and can't get over it. For me, on the other hand, well, I'm going more of the Tom Brady route. You know, the guy whose high school years, he was the third best athlete in his family behind his softball playing sisters. And even then was playing on the bench and playing on the bench and playing on the bench. And, you know, out of basically just, okay, why not? Was he able to get recruited by any college to go and be even then on the bench and on the bench on the bench until then, you know, most of his senior year, then he got to start. And then even then into the NFL draft, go and look up all those quarterbacks that got drafted higher than him in the NFL draft and how basically all of them wound up being busts, as opposed to Brady, who kept on memorizing the playbook, kept on sharpening fundamentals, and wound up winning 7 Super Bowls. In case you wonder why, he went from having the worst run in the NFL Combine of any quarterback and having a dad bod as a 21-year-old to now, you know, pushing 50 and being healthier and more successful and more famous now as a retired football player than he was as, you know, the same age that every other brain dead, but no, future fentanyl junkie SEC quarterback could ever hope to be. Those kind of people who had the exact opposite. They had that, you know, Anakin in the prequels sort of attitude where they were destined to be the great one. Everybody was telling them about the great prophecy of them and telling them about how great they were. And then with that sort of ego of how they're always the best in the field, everybody always tells them they're best in the field. But then the second they wind up facing any kind of bigger competition they were never exposed to before, you wind up putting them into a bigger pond and they're not the biggest fish out there. Then they psychologically crumble and they lash out, and that's where you get into the whole, you know, most powerful Jedi ever, and, you know, in my point of view, the Jedi are evil, all that sort of stuff. That's what you get with the difference between a Cam Newton and a Tom Brady. Not that, you know, anyone like my father or Patton Oswalt could go and have any sort of relatability to either one. Although he did seem to have, you know, an interesting hatred for one and an unhealthy amount of hero worship for the other. I mean, my opinion of Tom Brady changed over the years, but also at the very same time, his was just the type of zealotry where if Brady had this sort of cult-like attitude or went and wanted to start some sort of cult or whatever, that all the jealous DEI types like Mindy Kaling in the world would want to go and project onto Brady because the athletic, good-looking white guy is more successful than them and doesn't date women that look like them, well, then, yeah, he could have had people like my father who then would have most definitely loved to have been his Jonestown lieutenants, if you know about Jim Jones. But then again, we've also found out it's not just my father who turned out for years upon years to have been, you know, living a lie, or their life story was one massive lie. Because look at what our friend Count Dankula has to say about Helen Keller, as we are going to be going to the talent portion of the stream. Something you'll never hear from Patton Oswalt. And off we go. Of course, let's like this first.
You might see the title of this video and think that I've finally jumped the shark. That I've managed to posit something so stupid and so needlessly edgy that my credibility will from this point forward be forever tarnished. That I'm just saying all of this stuff for entertainment value. To which I say, no, I'm actually being totally serious and sincere right now. You just think that I'm joking because you're scared or something. Indeed, today I will be relaying to you the possibility that very famous deafblind author extraordinaire Helen Keller was, as a matter of fact, faking it. Now, why would I want to even entertain this notion? Do I just really hate blind and deaf people so much that I want to Snopes debunk them all like a lol random XD edgy dark redditor? Well, yeah, a little bit, but I also want to talk about it simply because I can. And that's as good a reason as any. It's my channel, you're just along for the ride. So shut the fuck up, you're going to enjoy it. Helen Keller was faking it.
They say I'm in my bag. Damn right, I'm a biz baddie, daddy. Here you go, daddy.
Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Sorry, I just got to hide all of the paint I've spilled all over it. So I guess I better establish who Helen Keller was, just in case some of you in the audience are unaware. Helen Adams Keller was an American author famed for being blind and deaf for the overwhelming majority of her conscious existence. She was born in Tuscumbia, Alabama on the 27th of June, 1880, and she enjoyed the basic privileges of sight and sound for a whopping 19 months, before having them all taken away from her by a serious illness, leaving her completely blind and deaf before she even hit her second birthday. Despite this, Helen would live on communicating via home signs before learning manual alphabet with her first teacher, one Anne Sullivan. Now, what the hell is manual alphabet? Well, it's basically those weird little gang signs that the middle-aged women in the corner of your TV throw up sometimes to communicate how they totally know that you shit on the floor. Basically, it was a sort of precursor to modern sign language. Kind of. I mean, a sort of proto-sign language has always existed since the very first deaf person ever existed, and it would be unique to that specific deaf person. But manual alphabet was sort of the first stages of creating a universal standardized model. Sort of. Kinda. Helen would go on to not only receive a full education, but she also managed to, in 1904, graduate cum laude from Radcliffe College with a Bachelor of Arts degree, becoming the very first deaf-blind person in history to do so. Which says a lot about arts degrees. Now, if you thought that the mere act of getting an education is impressive, you haven't seen anything yet. Because indeed, Helen was also a prolific author, having, throughout her entire life, written and published 14 books and over 475 speeches and essays, starting at just 11 years old with the 1891 classic, The Frost King, being a short story about Jack Frost of Winter fame. We will, of course, be coming back to this particular story, so keep it in mind. Now, independently of her illustrious writing career and being disabled and a woman, Helen was naturally drawn to the wiles of groups like the Socialist Party of America, going on to write many a memoir and essay detailing her undying love and passion for the plight of the proletariat. And to be completely fair to her, as much as I might haha commie LMAO post, she is probably one of the few examples of a person who can support socialism and not come across as a complete freeloading dork. She literally needs to rely on other people for stuff as basic as eyesight. So, no shit, she's going to become a collectivist. In her case, it's kind of entirely reasonable. Regardless, despite being literally blind and unable to pull the trigger, let alone hit the broadside of a barn, Helen Keller somehow managed to hit on occasion, including in her completely justified hatred of resident American Antichrist Woodrow Wilson, objecting to him on the grounds of being, well, Woodrow fucking Wilson. Look, the guy was such a piece of fucking work that even fucking Helen Keller could see him for what he was. Of course, Helen's politics by today's standards would be considered the most milquetoast liberal white woman bullshit physically possible. However, for the times, she was honestly quite the renegade, being involved in union action, suffragettism, and anti-war pacifism, when those specific eye-rolling shibboleths were actually quite groundbreaking. Remember, this was in the 1910s that she was doing this. The Soviet Union was still just a gaggle of larpers scattershotted across continental Europe in exile. And the jury was still out as to whether or not women were even sapient. However, credit where credit is due, there was actually much more to Madame Keller than just being the warbling couch void that learned what water was and proved that if you just believe in yourself, Keanu Chungus style, you can achieve anything, TM. She was, surprisingly enough, a real human being, and was savvy enough to not only wield her quite decent fame, but also strategically ham up and weaponize her own disabilities for the sake of positing and promoting her desired worldview and politics. Like a more partisan and marginally less unsightly Ricky Berwick. I know, what an unexpected shot across the bow. Challenge me to a fucking arm wrestle, you little gremlin. I'm fucking waiting for you. And nothing better exemplifies Helen's apparatchik flair than her statements given in an interview to the New York Tribune in 1916, appropriately titled, Why I Became an IWW. That being in reference to the industrial workers of the world. Helen would go on to, in effect, proclaim that the reasoning for her deaf-blindness was not just a mere tragedy bestowed through chance and happenstance, but was instead aided through the perfidious actions of capitalism. Going so far as to dunk...
She was a woman, that's it. And, hey, ahead of her time of being a woman whom blamed all her failures on a lack of socialism.
On history itself, deriding the studies of antiquity as nothing more than hot air that detracts from what really matters. Potatoes. To quote the lady herself,
I got one challenge for you. Try Whisper Flow once. One time. And I promise you'll understand why I haven't typed the full...
I'm sorry.
You turned into a seal on that one.
No, we was just wondering what was going on. Anyway.
Oh, I was outside reference. You have like an anaphylactic.
No, I was just making a really bad joke.
Yeah, she should use like the fucking hand gestures, like she's doing a proper speech.
Well, she does use hand gestures, sign language. Kagi Bunchi. Oh, like, yeah. Yeah, she does. Anyway, I will continue with the rest of the quote. To quote... Very, very offensive. To quote the lady herself, they did not teach me about things as they are today, or about the vital problems of the people. They taught me Greek drama and Roman history, the celebrated achievements of war, rather than those of the heroes of peace. For instance, there were a dozen chapters on war where there were just a few paragraphs about the inventors. And it is this overemphasis on the cruelties of life that breeds the wrong ideal. Education taught me that it was a finer thing to be a Napoleon than to create a new potato. But we have those. They're called new potatoes. All of this hot air is to say that she is not just a mere deafblind daisy. There was a lot more to her than met the eye. If she were alive today, she would be a chronically online gremlin who'd be making weird TikToks complaining about the need to decolonize the schools, as well as pushing her shitty Etsy store to sell beautiful Che Guevara merch. And that's not an insult. I respect the hustle. I love capitalism too. But despite that statement being just a lot of comic gobbledygook, it was very well put together and intelligent sounding. It almost makes you think that Helen had a lot more ability than she was letting on. Because sure, the indomitable human spirit TM also infests women sometimes. And we are remarkably adaptable creatures independently of said spirit. But being able to not only conceive of such high concepts in prose, but also being able to author hundreds of works in the condition that she was in is nothing short of an absolute miracle. Or it's extremely fucking suspicious. Indeed, I have reason to believe that Helen Keller was, as a matter of fact, faking it. Or she was at the very least being exploited by her handlers and carers who were using her condition to make her unknowingly push their politics. And I have some arguments that could be considered only sort of shaky and only somewhat offensive. So how about that? Well, let me just get into the meat and potatoes of it. Let's return to that very first book of hers, The Frost King. Now, you see, her breakout hit at just 11 years old was not without controversy. Because despite the fact that its creation itself was canonically a miracle and an absolute triumph of the human will, it indeed still came under a lot of flack for something most unexpected given the circumstances. It was supposedly plagiarized. According to the Virginia-based Goodson Gazette, the story was, as a matter of fact, a not-so-well-obfuscated retelling of the Margaret Canby piece, The Frost Fairies, a short story within The Birdie and His Fairy Friends, with the similarities between the two works being so similar that it was theorized that this entire book was a fraud from Helen Keller's carers. As for Keller herself, well, she obviously denied the accusations, claiming that she had no recollection of ever having read the work. Well, no offense, but I mean, of course she fucking didn't, but nor having the work read to her. But letters from the period of time from her showed that she was having dreams that were suspiciously similar to entire passages from the Birdie book. Now, that means one of three things. One, she had it read to her and she just took some conscious liberties. Two, she had it read to her but suffered from an acute and narratively useful case of cryptomnesia, meaning in layman's terms that she just consciously forgot about it. But the story lingered in the back of her mind and came to the forefront in the form of dreams. Or three, she's a psyker. It would seem that the common consensus falls into number two, which is a bit of a stretch, but hey, she is deaf and blind, and also totally at the whim of her carers, right? Well, we actually can't say that for absolute certainty, because you see, deafness, blindness, and therefore deaf-blindness all work on a spectrum. It's not just that you are guaranteed to see absolutely fuck all or hear absolutely nothing if you're blind or deaf, respectively. Instead, it usually manifests in a gradient of diminished senses. The extremes absolutely do exist, but there is every possibility that Helen Keller's POV was something more like... This is worth bringing up because Helen Keller was kicking about with this condition in the 1890s through to the 1930s. That is to say that time period was not exactly at the cutting edge of medical awareness and research into the fields of deafness, blindness, etc., etc. So we never really got a good measure of the extent of her deaf-blindness, and we just have to posthumously guess how disabled she really was. Though, even then, in all fairness, at her most hypothetically able-bodied, she would still have needed her carer. Speaking of which, actually, Helen's carer, Anne Sullivan, is something of a complicated figure, being arguably the most important part of Helen Keller's life and acting as her de facto conduit for interfacing with the world itself. Entering her life in 1887 when Helen was just 7 years old. Anne Sullivan would then go on to essentially become joined to her at the hip, with just about every single public appearance from that point on having Anne hanging over Helen and acting as Helen's personal C-3PO. And potentially her Grima Wormtongue. Indeed, looking through the life story of Helen Keller, one cannot help but note that there was a strange symbiosis for the pair, with Helen getting the obvious benefits of, communication. However, what's not nearly as often talked about was the benefits that Anne got. As in, she got to essentially be the spokesperson and agent for a truly one-of-a-kind literary mind. After all, it was Anne Sullivan who would break the legendary water pump story. You know, when Anne managed to teach Helen Keller her very first word that she could actually identify with abstract spelling, which was water, utilizing a pump that they had out the back of their house in Alabama alongside tactile charades, as well as spelling out water whilst, running water over her hand. Also, how would Helen know that it was actually water that was being poured on her hand? It could have been crude oil or even milk. I mean, I understand that this was a breakthrough in terms of successfully linking a word to a tactile concept, but come on. And by complete coincidence, the person to relay this astonishing breakthrough was none other than Anne Sullivan herself. Yeah, I totally taught this dopey deafblind broad the word water. No, you can't talk to her to verify this because only I'm able to. After all, I'm the only person that knows her very particular form of communication that was very conveniently tailored by me. And no, I won't teach it to you.
God, sounds like either Joseph Smith or my father.
It's fair to be suspicious of much of Helen Keller's early life due precisely to the fact that not only were her expressions of thought mediated by this weird boomer shadowing her, but the very thoughts themselves were probably given foundations by her. After all, who taught her the words that she's using to construct these thoughts? Exactly, it's fucking Anne Sullivan. Helen Keller, the free thinker, arguably doesn't exist. Now, granted, Helen Keller would go on to learn things like Braille and have a whole swathe of interpersonal relations and conversations, including a fucking love affair with some chancer called Peter Fagan, her private secretary who managed to woo her so thoroughly that she got fucking secretly engaged to him, pissing off her entire family in the process. By the way, this guy was literally known as the finger-spelling socialist. Is that how she learned what socialism was? I mean, no wonder that Anne didn't approve, because that was her job. And Helen Keller was her job in a lot more ways than just being her carer. She was essentially Helen's marketing exec and agent. Nearly every single time Helen wrote a book or a letter or made a public appearance or gave a speech, it all had to eventually be screened by Sullivan before it would finally reach our ears. like a weirdly Orwellian version of Chinese whispers. Like, that's literally the position that Nguema engineered himself into so that he could seize power and become one of the worst leaders in human history. I'm being completely serious when I say that Helen Keller is Equatorial Guinea. Now, am I saying that Anne Sullivan was on the very cusp of assuming direct control of Helen Keller and declaring herself a Hitlerian Marxist?
When nicotine cravings keep you up at night, the real nightmare is the next day.
Bidding ends on Lego Pikachu. In 3.
No. Because, amongst the other obvious reasons, women don't exactly make for darkly enjoyable, eccentric autocrats. Regardless, I think I've laid out some pretty good reasons as to doubt if Helen Keller even exists. As, indeed, in an abstract way, she never really did. If a tree falls in Helen Keller's mind and nobody is able to cleanly communicate it, did it even happen? Why don't we talk about the fact that Helen Keller was literally wheeled out onto the vaudeville circuit to perform shoulder to shoulder with the jugglers, the clowns, and the other freak shows live on stage in a fucking theatre, where she, with Anne, of course, would, I shit you not, perform a Q&A with the audience. She was not just an attraction to be gawked and bewildered at like a bearded woman or a seal in a tie, but she was given as dull a fucking segment as a Q&A. Made even worse by the fact that some of the questions were rehearsed in advance. And the audience knew that. Hey, Miss Keller, say you can see. I can see. What? Oh my God. That's right, Helen Keller performed on stage in a live theatrical event where the audience was knowingly duped into a sense of unreality as the segments of the performance were all pre-planned. All the while, she was managed by a literal fucking mouthpiece. Helen Keller is a professional wrestler. Anne Sullivan is basically fucking Paul Heyman, which honestly fits because that means that Helen Keller is Roman Reigns. What's Roman Reigns known for? Saying absolutely fuck all on account of struggling to speak normally, as well as being famously ill and pointing his finger so that people can reciprocate. You know, I feel like I can be a bit much with the wrestling bits sometimes, but I mean, for fuck's sake, life just keeps imitating it. All of this is to say, and I genuinely cannot believe that I'm about to say this fucking sentence, Helen Keller was being actively warped by her own gimmick. Like, seriously, the fact that Anne Sullivan was also fucking blind should have made it obvious. Now, granted, she could not only see much more than Helen and could, you know, actually hear things, but still, it was quite literally a case of the blind leading the blind. Not even Vince could have made that shit up. And he's made up some shit.
I agree about that. Maybe that's why if Anne Sullivan was in charge of ECW, there would have been an ECW network streaming successfully right now.
Do you reckon that Helen Keller even knew that Anne Sullivan was also blind? Does it even matter? It was seemingly all kayfabe anyway. Like, I'm not even going to bother getting into Polly Thompson, who was some random Scottish woman who literally had no experience with the blind or the deaf whatsoever, just casually learning the trade of being the Helen Whisperer and managing to assume the mantle of Keller's mouth when Anne kicked the bucket because storyline TM. Basically, Helen Keller was, for a fact, deaf and blind. And yes, she did learn to communicate, but only in an extremely basic fashion. So having her just so happen to be able to understand and even write about such concepts as socialism, when that just so happened to be the exact same politics of all of her handlers who were all coaching her and who were also helping her write her work and even reviewing it themselves before it was released, before pushing for it to be published. Nah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It was I mean, did she just so happen to have the exact same politics as the people who were translating her speech? She just, wow, what are the fucking chances? Shut the fuck up. They were taking her for an absolute ride. Helen Keller was being completely taken advantage of. Her handlers were using her condition and the miracle of her learning to communicate to get as much press and interest as they possibly could so that they could get as many eyes on them as they possibly could before they did a rug pull. Look, we taught the little deafblind girl to communicate. Yay! Anyway, socialism. It was pretty obvious what they were doing. Although, taking advantage of the disabled and downtrodden to push your shitty, retarded politics is just leftism 101. Which they are still doing to this day. I mean, Helen Keller didn't even know the word for water until she was 7 years old. But then, just 4 years after that, when she was just 11, she apparently wrote an entire book, and then it turned out that the book was heavily plagiarized. And I'm not being mean here, she clearly didn't read the book it was plagiarized from. It was blatantly her handlers. The entire thing was a fucking scam. I believe that they were faking all of her books and speeches and writing them themselves to make themselves look like the miracle workers that would garner fame, which they could then use to push their shitty politics. Helen Keller was completely taken advantage of. And how was she supposed to argue her own case when those that she required on for communication were the very scumbags who were using her? But all of that is neither here nor there. At the end of the day, Helen Keller, like wrestling, is real to me. Because I also hate Woodrow Wilson. However, Helen Keller, the gimmick, and Helen Keller, the person, are very different. Probably. After all, the disease was probably very, very real, the deaf-blindness was probably very, very real, and the lump sum of her opinions were probably real. But to what extent? Well, that's just kayfabe, baby.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody should subscribe.
Under a moon so bright, King Bear soaked in his kingdom and wished it all good night.
Airport.
I agree with everything that was just said right there, in case you're curious.
So one of those things that most people never really think about too much. You pick a place on Skyscanner, you maybe glance over the rough area where you're landing, and then you drag your sleep-deprived corpse through security, hoping that this time they won't mistake the coffee that you brought with you as a gift for explosives. Which actually did happen to someone that I know. So imagine that you are finally going to Japan for the very first time. Destination, Tokyo. In your head, you're expecting the entire weeb package. Anime, ramen, mascots, and vending machines every 5 steps that probably fucking bow to you before dispensing. And to be fair, Haneda Airport actually feels pretty close to that fantasy. Clean, efficient, full of entertainment, and good food. I mean, take a look at Edo Koji at Terminal 3. It's literally designed to look like an Edo period shopping district, and it feels alive and is the perfect front door for modern Japan. But as you look at your ticket, you notice that you are not landing at Haneda Airport. You're instead landing at Narita Airport. You think to yourself, surely it can't be that much different. It's still Japan and it's still in Tokyo. But as you land, the vibes change immediately. Narita is obviously a real airport, a major and functional one, in fact. But the feeling is weird. Not bad, just sanitized. Like, this entire place was designed to get you in and out in the most efficient way with as little soul and personality as possible. It really feels like the airport version of the back rooms. Endless clean corridors, artificial lights, empty spaces, and as you go through and enter the underground railways,
And here's hoping that just mentioning the back rooms doesn't get my stream shut down like it happened last night when I was showing that there's a new Backrooms video uploaded to Kane Pixel's channel. I put nothing past them now. This is the immortal game of angering the YouTube algorithm.
you're hit with the full subliminal space vibe. And at that point, you can't help but ask, why does this place feel so fucking weird? Why does Narita Airport feel like a place that was forced into existence and then professionally sterilized on a spiritual level? Well, it's because that's basically what happened. Narita Airport is not just another megastructure. It was built atop one of the nastiest, weirdest, and most violent clashes in post-war Japan history. Furious farmers, radical students, riots, barricades, towers, literal siege weapons, and a government trying to drag the future onto land whose owners had very, very strong opinions about being removed from their homes. So they decided to fight back.
But it doesn't involve lying about Indians being placid, peace-loving people, so of course this is not a history that gets brought up that much.
One of the most brutal riots in all of Japanese history. The Sanrizuka struggle. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. Now, as you're all very, very aware, the internet is increasingly becoming an intangible and integral part of society. And that because of this, Narita Airport came from a period where the entire country was speedrunning its way into being an economic superpower. After 1945, Japan was rebuilt at a breakneck pace. New factories, exports, city expansions, and by the 50s and 60s, the country was what I would call an economic miracle. I mean, just look at this. This is Tokyo in 1945, and this is Tokyo in 1955. That is just a period of 10 years. While in my country, we've got potholes older than I am. But anyway, new roads, trains, ports, housing, the list goes on. And everything was under pressure because Japan was trying its best to modernize, industrialize, and prove that it was no longer the bomb-to-fuck ruin that it once was. And this is where some obvious problems began. If your economy is booming and your government is desperate to look globally relevant, eventually you will need an airport big enough to handle all of that shit. Now, at the time, the aforementioned Haneda Airport was Tokyo's main airport. And by the early 60s, it was already being squeezed very, very hard. Air traffic was naturally rising as airplane travel became more common. And the areas around Haneda Airport were already heavily built up with city development, which made expansion of the airport very, very difficult, especially because more flights also meant more noise for the people who were living all around the airport. Expanding it properly was not easy, so the government decided to slap a new international airport in Tokyo. So on paper, that sounds pretty reasonable, doesn't it? And that's the important part. The construction of this airport didn't start as some evil government plan. A fast-growing country logically needed more infrastructure. Haneda Airport was overcrowded and the government wanted a proper...
Hello to Forever Lost right there as we are going into the first time I've drawn Lady Death in a good long while. And also, we finally got to put some use of this Playboy lingerie tracing that I've done. So, yes, this has been very good, very upbeat, very upscale right now. Oh, ho, ho, yo, ho, ho, and a bottle of rum for everybody. Just a little bit. Everybody's saying hello to Forever right here, and since the character's figure is mostly white, we're gonna that's why we put so much effort into the line work here, and how we're gonna have to be careful in making it all compensate for the lack of color.
or large-scale gateway to support trade and growth. Fair enough. But, as always, the government did what governments do best and immediately fucked everything up. The search for a location to build this airport started in the early 60s, and the plans that were drawn up in 1963 looked at areas in Chiba and Ibaraki. The Aviation Council initially leaned towards Tomisato, and that decision blew right back in their face almost immediately, because farmers and opposition parties pushed back very, very hard on the proposal. Partly due to them not being properly informed, and partly due to, shockingly, rural people not liking finding out that the government wants to demolish their entire community to build a fucking airport. So the government got sneaky. In 1966, under Prime Minister Isaku Sato, the government quietly shifted the site northeast to Sanrizuka and Shibayama in the Chiba prefecture, roughly 66 kilometers from central Tokyo. And the logic was autistically arrogant. Part of the area included state-owned land from the old imperial farm. So officials convinced themselves that this would mean less private land for them to have to take over, which would make this entire process much easier to just brute force through. Except Sanrizuka was not empty space, it was old farmland with deep roots. Northern Chiba had been farming country for centuries by this point, and the area already had a reputation for being stubborn as fuck. Some villages went all the way back to the Edo period. And because the government had less control there, the region had built up a history of farmers who generally did not like being told what to do. And
hello to Ruby Who just came in to gift a membership. That is beautiful. That is good. That is fun. That is great. So Rita Skeeter just went and became a channel member. That is absolutely amazing. And that means Rita Skeeter will get to see what we just uploaded recently with the new location for the Screamers Halloween costume horror superstore. Oh yes, oh yes. And I'm pleasantly surprised by those shorts I did involving the Dr. Decker Nightbreed mask doing so well. That was very great to see. Absolutely. No, I wasn't expecting that. And well, maybe you might see some more content like that coming up for Halloween. You just have to be ready for it. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. And everybody say hello to Ruby Who for bringing in the channel membership. Getting the stream going now. Can we get a trifecta? We've got the channel membership. Now can we get a super chat and business in the store? Anything from a donation to an order of encrypted to, well, anything in between. Can this happen? Will it be going on tonight? There is a chance. There is a chance. So you're telling me there's a chance. Something upbeat in the middle of this video about a 12-year-long violent protest against an airport being built in Japan. A story I've not heard of, and I'm pretty sure that most Americans are not aware of this story at all. And yes, a great thing for Ruby Who, for sure. Absolutely, positively. And this is the thing about our friend Lady Death, is that she's a very monochromatic character. But when you look at pages of the comics and all that, they too like some maybe, neutral gray tint here and there to her skin. And honestly, that's the best possible thing to do. So, I am for it. Let's see if you're for it. I don't give a rat's behind because I'm moving in. I'm so sick and tired of living in the van down by the river. Is Lady Death in my store? Let me see. I have Lady Death pen and ink pieces that might be available. Let me see if we go down and look at this together. Down to the pop culture places. Actually, I do not have Lady Death available in my store, but I do have Lady Death pen and ink pieces. I have multiple Lady Death pen and ink pieces that are, I just don't have them up in the store. I can show you what they look like here, though. Going through my dashboard through Square and looking at the items, I can show you where my Lady Death pieces are. To see, all right, let me go. All right. Here is one. Here is a Lady Death illustration I have. But hold on, and just right over here in my drawers, I know I've got plenty more of them. Here it is. The actual physical piece I've got right there. And I think there's more. Here we are. Here we are. Ruby Hoop says, very cool. I'll check out your store. Yeah, because I've got these 3 pieces of Lady Death right here, these pen and ink ones. Color, no, but pen and ink, yes. So here's this one and this one. And hello to Nick right there, coming on in. But yes, these aren't in the pop culture illustration category of the store, though. Yeah, these 3, I've got the item up, but they are not there. So this would be something where it'd be like I could actually send out like an email with the link directly to those items so that they could be ordered just directly that way without having to put them up in the store. Or if you just want me to put them up in the store, and I'll go ahead and do that out of 1 or 2 or 3. Yes, very nice. And yes, very Lady Death here with the scythe. Or Lady Death here just posing with the smoke around her, I mean. It's all up to personal taste. Like I said, it's not up to what I like, it's what the consumer likes. Whatever it is that the person wants to commission or buy, that's what should be the ticket. Yeah. Don't want to be one of those conceited types who, like the Marvel and DC modern artists I mock so much, who literally cannot go a day without, threatening people for the crime of having the wrong politics in between e-begging because they're such underpaid idiots who do everything with digital slop that they have no actual ability to support themselves. So they have to go and get themselves crowdfunding so that they can buy groceries living in New York City or Seattle or LA. As we're now getting up in there. And also, Ruby, which out of those 3 illustrations I showed was your favorite? The one with the scythe, the one where she's sitting, or the one with the smoke behind her? Just curious which out of those. Like when I went and had all of those pieces up in the store for Black Widow, that was something where, yeah, I actually had gotten the idea of Doug to go and gather all of my Black Widow illustrations I had, and I remember you picked out the one that was in there. The scythe one, okay. That's great to know. I mean, it's the same as any other piece of, I've done. I mean, any other pen and ink illustration, they go for $25 in the store, and there's that, shipping fee, the $6 shipping fee. So yeah, it'll be the same as anyway, and it's up to you of whether or not you'd want to go and like either, drop a donation into the store to pay for it since it's not there, or would you want me to add it into the store tomorrow, and then, sometime at your earliest convenience, you could go and order it directly, legitimately through the store. The decision is up to you. As I'm trying keep coloring it while keeping this lady in frame. I mean, like I said, especially when you are working independently, it's an independent business, you have to prioritize customer service. Yeah, the Scythe one, I think this one turned out really nice as well. And we can actually, let's try to keep them both in frame while I put some color on this one. Yeah, the inside of the cape being Prussian blue in reference to the original Steve Hughes, Brian Pulido and Steve Hughes Lady Death comics. The like interior of her cape would be colored in a more darker blue, as opposed to it all being, you know, black with like grayscale for coloring and or inking. Just saying right there. Yeah, deal. Now we got that. All right, clear it out. Oh yeah. Just got to get it on those margins. Just around here. Yep. Got all these little corners around here. I don't know. You've been found. Would whip out half of everything to have. Would whip out half of everything to have her. Oh well, perfectly understandable. Now, for all we know, maybe like, you know, the Lady Death. Her the end game for Fiona is to basically be Lady Death. Yeah, might be seeing some crossover, surprise crossover in the future. You don't know. You have to keep your eyes open. Just to try to smooth that out. Like I said, because there is not that much color involved with rendering the character in her classic shape, we gotta go and try to make sure the areas where we do have color in there have to be done. I mean, yeah, go. Yes, you can. Of course you can, Ruby. Na 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 na. You gonna crash. Ma 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 ma. Whoa. Got there's some areas that's I didn't quite properly clean up yet, so rub that in there. Oh, yeah. Now we got it. Cleaner. Perfect. Oh yeah. Oh, whoa. Now around here, a little minute area. Oh, wow. There we go. Now we get over to the other part of the interior of her cape and get this all cleaned out. Yeah, that's something I'm a stickler for. After seeing that lesson from Adam Hughes do a drawing demonstration at Comic-Con one year, Where you're using the Copics, always make sure to clean. Always erase any leftover pencil marks. They're under here. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. The Mad Titan wanted to kill half of the universe to have Death by his side. Who is hotter in Death, Marvel Comics or Lady Death? Oh, the Lady Death, this version for sure. This Lady Death. Absolutely. And I'll fight anybody on that one. It's all good. Check the rhyme. If you jacked him, how come you got a receipt? I stole that too. I know I look back. I know what I'm about to do is going to look whack, but it's just a joke, so please don't shoot me. If you jacked him, how come you got a receipt? I stole that too. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And of course, now this is all coming as we are on our way to eventually get the next big college football season going. That'll be great to see that getting on up. Our friends in Ann Arbor getting ready for more combat. And, well, we got Bryce Underwood as team captain. So that is already a big step up for the Maize and Blue. And let's hope there's more of that to be seen in the future. More of that greatness, more of that success. All this happened. Tribe Called Quest. Oh yeah, there we go, there we go. Man, if say the blue looks great on her, well, if you want to see what it is I'm referencing, in particular with trying to do that darker blue, that Prussian blue on her, is these, you look at here, like this is the early days of her, and you see the interior of the cape has a more dark blue instead of just going all black. Instead of, like, you know, black with grayscale for all the spots left white in the inking. No, they went with dark blue, which I'm all for. Absolutely. Positively. Ha ha, au français. Bienvenue, 012, mon chéri. I do believe you are going to find, mon chéri, a little truth behind my love secret. How much for Lady Death? 31. Because it's a pen and ink piece like this is 25 and also 6 for shipping. That's the price for the Lady Death right here. Our beauty with the scythe. Oh, yeah, there we go. Now up here as well. Too legit. Too legit to quit. 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 Bah. Whoa, ho. Ruby Hoove just dropped in a $20 super chat. So, all right, we got ourselves a 2 out of 3 right now tonight. Oh, yes. That was beautiful. That was amazing. That was fun. That is fine. Oh, yeah. With a little hand waving emoji, yes. We can't see her, but Ruby's time is now. I always look forward to her cosplay at cons. Most of the ladies that do Lady Death are quite pretty. Well, they should be for an outfit this skimpy. And because also she's something that is not as like generic and well known as a Wonder Woman or, the Margot Robbie, Suicide Squad. Yes, that is great to see. And yes, we will soon be shipping this lady off. Oh, and with another $20 super chat from Ruby Hoove with a little waving and an A-OK. Thank you. This most definitely will be getting shipped out tomorrow, along with maybe some extra surprises that might be coming along her way besides this. Since I want to give in abundance as the ultimate thank you to anybody, getting my work. If only to show how much that, yes, this is actually a special event for my audience. And yet, yeah, absolutely positively. This is the best time to be saying dang. And we got the Dragon Erebus 2974 coming in. Everybody say hello to the Dragon Erebus. Nice to see you here. As we are going in and getting some. Everybody welcome in the Dragon Erebus as we got some hooters right here to take care of. Looks like they're gonna have to just go with the brush then. We've had a Lady Death poster on our wall since the 80s. Well, Jesus, you've had it for that long that I truly feel honored that a piece of mine is now going to be up on the wall next to that kind of proper Lady Death. This is the best kind of validation, to have someone pay for your work of a character that they know and love to the point of having a poster up there for decades. But yes, Dragon Erebus, welcome into the show. Tell us a bit about yourself, whatever you're of liberty to see, or to say, as we just went in and made a sale right now on this Lady Death illustration that will be shipped out tomorrow. Thanks to Ruby Hoove. Thanks to Our Lady Ruby Hoove. Oh, yes. Trying to rig it off something proper. It's all good. A street soldier. Now you know why I'm too legit to quit. That's right. Too legit. Too legit to quit. Too legit. Too Too legit to quit. Too legit. Too legit to quit. Too legit to quit. Oh yeah. Outside. It's outside. It's outside. Too legit. Too legit. Oh, I got a hammer. Good night, y'all. Well, you certainly made it a good night, Ruby, tonight. So everybody, thank Ruby, thank her again and again and again. And well, most definitely, we are going to be having ourselves a fun time. Oh, that is good. Oh, this is fun. Yeah. So. She gonna like it. I think I'm gonna like it too. Hello. Please got the snail beauty salon. It's me, Swan. Hello. So now we know that Mad TV clips are the same as showing backrooms. They both get streams shit hammered for copyright. Even if we all love Miss Swan, we know Miss Swan, we like Miss Swan. Yes, let's get back to the... no, I have not seen the last Marvel trailer. I honestly, like I said, do not care. If I have interest in Marvel, it's, things that are actually related to the actual characters and actual comics, like, say, having gone and reread the Steve Ditko Doctor Strange stuff, the original couple years of Doctor Strange comics from back in the 60s, which are far more worthy of your time. I had a bad dream. I want to sleep in your bed. I like to stretch out. Yeah, that sucked when they did that yesterday. So, yeah. Something more pleasant. A riot.
A lot of the land was once part of the imperial family's old farm. So locals were very attached to it. Some parts of it were sold off in 1923 and again after the war in 1946. And many of the people that ended up farming there were not rich landowners. Most of them were poor or displaced people who had already been kicked around by Japan and had spent years turning this very, very rough and shit farmland into fully successful farms through brutal and hard work. So by the time the government came back for the land, it wasn't just some pile of dirt to the locals. It was something that they had suffered to build with their own two hands. For the locals, this wasn't progress. It was yet another chapter of being told to suffer for the will of the state. And the way that the decision was announced made everything so much fucking worse, because the government did not sit down to chat with the locals, explain the case in an honest way, and then build trust with them and figure out a way that they could all work together. No. That would require basic fucking respect for your fellow man. Instead, the locals were barely consulted, and many of them actually learned about the airport from a public broadcast or in the newspapers. After the decision had already been fucking made. They were never asked and never consulted. So, when the locals heard about this, they were very, very unhappy. So first, land expropriation. The government intended to acquire the land through compulsory purchase if needed. Meaning, if the owners refused to sell, the government was prepared to legally force them to. Second, livelihood. These were farming families. Their fields were not just a little fucking silly side hobby. These fields were their entire economic system, and many of them had spent years turning poor soil into productive farmland, so the compensation they were being offered was widely seen as very inadequate. And even if the government was being very, very generous, you still can't really compensate for ripping out the system that the farmers' entire lives had been built around. And third, trust. The authoritarian way that the government handled the situation sent a clean message to the locals. Your consent means nothing. The future is here, old man.
Your consent means nothing. There are plenty of women that have been to Homely Hills, California that have heard that too. Look up what mansion it resides in Holmby Hills, California, if you don't understand what I'm referencing.
Step the fuck aside, and if you don't like it, tough titty. All of those things were more than enough reason.
Trevor says, my bro and his kids went back to England today. It was fun. 3 weeks for me. All a good time seeing my nephews and starting to get in the Marvel and DC. All right. And Anonymous, speaking of England, Anonymous just woke up. All right. Hello, everybody. Everybody say hello to our friend there, Anonymous, as we are in the middle of this little lady right here. This little lady by the name of Lady Death, and whom one of our old pieces of her actually sold to Ruby Hoove earlier in the stream. Yes, this one of Lady Death we will be shipping out tomorrow. And Forever brings up, me and my bros have been showing them the 90s cartoons, as well you should. I was mentioning that they're doing single-issue facsimile reprints of the old 60s Silver Surfer stuff. And, well, the Silver Surfer cartoon that only ran that 1 year on Fox is also an underrated gem. And besides the standards of X-Men and Spider-Man at the time, but there was also, they had cartoons for Fantastic Four and Iron Man as well, which are also cool. And if you remember, after the Spider-Man cartoon ended, they did a sort of cartoon of Spider-Man 2099, although it was more obviously trying to ape off the success of Batman Beyond, called Spider-Man Unlimited, if you remember that. And of course, the second season of the Iron Man cartoon had an intro that is absolutely badass. Too bad it was for a show that's not as remembered well. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll show you the intro right here. Here we go. Just that opening second of that alone is automatically badass. But then also, of course, I mean, with Iron Man, one of the visual iconographies they always are going to do some way or another is to invoke the Vitruvian Man. I mean, there have been multiple Iron Man covers of comics throughout like the 80s and 90s that did the Vitruvian Man right there, like you just saw that circle. And hell, look, they've even got like little cartoon versions of the Vitruvian Man up there, the Da Vinci self-portrait, and some other Da Vinci, illustrations from his sketchbooks. A little bit of Marvel humor that actually got a chuckle out of me, being that thing that was that one line that was in the first major trailer for the first Iron Man movie of, you've been called the Da Vinci of our time. How do you feel about that? Absolutely ridiculous. I don't paint. Although still the Vitruvian Man symbolism is something that has been a thing that artists have been invoking with Iron Man for a while now. Back when he was still, a C-list character for Marvel. I mean, the biggest impact he would have would be involved, the Avengers. He was better remembered for contributing to the Avengers than he was for any of his own solo comics, except for that run in the early 80s with David Michelini and John Romita Jr. and Bob Layton, the famous Demon in a Bottle storyline, which actually I was able to get a trade of that at a convention last year, and I got it for free. because like I think the pages actually were falling out, and they were like, oh yeah, you can take it. And then I just went and re-glued the pages back into their spine, and it's actually stayed in place. Just, the crazy glue I got from Amazon that I just have in my drawer. Yes, pretty good cartoon. And also, well, if you saw when we showed that Pam Anderson movie Raw Justice, the airplane guy, the second guy she has the sex scene with, the one where it's not the one where it isn't Pam Anderson getting her butthole tongue punched. Yeah, that guy also was the voice of Iron Man on this cartoon. So between this and Airplane, I'm guessing that guy's just typecast as people with drinking problems. Okay, and people think that, the searing, no, it was on brand. The searing electric guitars of 90s Marvel intros. Isn't that so much more badass and attributing to the character's history with the hammer strikes, how much physical work is going into building this new suit, the hammer glinting of the light in welding like that, and the blacksmithing like that, having the previous different incarnations of Iron Man costume. The initial big gray body, space battle suit thing, then making it all gold, and then the more form-fitting one where it was red, hot rod red and gold, but with like the horns on the mask. Then the streamlined one that basically became the standard Iron Man look for decades that Gene Colan perfected when he finally got his own solo book in the 60s. And then stayed that way pretty much until like the early 90s. And yeah, what you saw in the cartoon and what you would see in like, Marvel-related toys or in any sort of video game that he would appear in, yeah, that's then what you saw in the 90s from the Armor Wars storyline. In particular, I think it was Armor Wars 2. That was the one where they brought John Romita Jr. to come back, but it was John Romita Jr. in his, he had finally really figured out his own drawing style with John Byrne John Byrne writing with John Romita Jr. drawing in his, his signature style having fully formed, and also that one great issue with the new, cooler look for the Living Laser being one of the big Iron Man villains. See that all the different versions of the suits before? Yeah. Love the older cartoons as well, you should. And then you wonder why every Marvel cartoon show, after the 90s, it cannot compare to just that intro. And it shows who the animators they had or whatever studios they're working with then knew what they were doing. And ever since then, it's been so all over the place and nowhere near. The 2000s, you had that MTV Spider-Man cartoon with Neil Patrick Harris starring. There was the Wolverine and the X-Men cartoon that came and went. You had the... there was that Fantastic Four one, and none of them have matched that. The best they can do is some shallow nostalgia repeats like X-Men 97.
To start a resistance. So, in 1966, the locals organized. Farmers and residents of the area formed what became known as the Sanrizuka Shibayama United Opposition League against construction of Narita Airport. But that doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, so it was shortened to the Hantai Dome. With an A, not an E. So... be very, very careful when Googling that. But anyway, that group was not just some vague little club that meets once a month to write down some complaints that nobody reads. It became the beating heart of the local resistance. And one of the key figures was Isaku Tomura, a local farmer, which mattered a lot because he wasn't just some random guy with a power fantasy. He represented the anger of the people who actually lived on the land that the government was targeting. And it didn't end there. The movement started attracting outside support as well. And that was when this entire movement really started growing some teeth. Left-wing parties like the Japan Socialist Party and the Japanese Communist Party also backed the resistance. Yeah, remember how that party went? But anyway, then, most notably, radical students and New Left activists also got involved as well, including the Zengakuren, a very, very famous militant student federation that already had a reputation for fights with the police in the 60s. And that alliance makes perfect sense once you look at the broader political climate. Also, yes, there was once a point in history where leftists did actually hate the government and wanted to fight against the government stealing things from the citizens. Better times. Also, broken clock, etc., etc. Japan in the 60s was already having basically daily protests, including student movements, labor unrest, anti-Vietnam War protests, and the infamous ANPO protests against the US-Japan Security Treaty, which is a whole other can of worms that I might open at some point. But anyway, a lot of Japanese radicals saw the airport not just as a local land dispute, but as a symbol of everything that they hated.
Yes, everything commies touch turns to shit without fail every time. And no matter how many times you say it to his son Piker, he'll keep on denying it because he's a retard. Who, if you tried to play a game of chess with him, he would just put the pieces up his nose and then put them up the butt of his dog.
State power, capitalism, and Japan's alignment with American powers during the Cold War. Because, yes, believe it or not, the left did actually hate government overreach at one point.
So you want to start a podcast, but you're not sure how. Riverside's got you covered. First, go to riverside.com and open an account. And when you're ready to record, just hit the record button to capture high quality video and audio from, well, anywhere. Even if the only camera that you have is your phone, with Riverside, you'll still look like a pro. And when it comes to editing, it is truly idiot proof. Even with zero experience, you can create content like...
They love it now because it's now them doing it. But with all of these groups now involved, what could have stayed as just a rural compensation argument just started snowballing and snowballing. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but farmers and radical students are not really the most natural combination on Earth. But in the case of Sanrizuka, it just worked. At least for a while. Because both sides saw the same enemy standing in front of them. At first, the resistance took forms that still looked normal by the standards of what was to come. Petitions, demonstrations, sit-ins, and efforts to block surveys and inspections. But once the government and airport officials tried to move the paperwork into reality, opposition, of course, hardened. Farmers started blocking roads, and survey teams were met by people who had absolutely no intention whatsoever of helping the government measure out the dimensions of their own erasure. Then, on October the 10th, 1966, airport officials arrived to start marking out the land under the protection of around 1,500 riot police. Protesters tried to block the road, but they were violently dragged away and beaten.
Yes. History tends to repeat itself every 20 years, it seems, with this commie bullshit. So sick of it. Government overreach is always the start of the bullshit every time. Yes. And how it's something communists always exploit to try to get what they want. And somehow the only thing they can do is to change the subject to something, whatever Jon Stewart tells them to think.
And some farmers that refused to leave or sell the land actually dug underground bunkers, stocking them up with food, and the farmers had to be literally excavated out of them. Some of them being so deep that it actually took the police hours and sometimes days to get these farmers out of the fucking ground. And once everyone saw that the government was perfectly willing to use force, the gates of hell really started opening. By 1967, the anti-airport resistance decided that it would accept support from absolutely anyone, regardless of political factions. Meaning, the farmers were now being backed in larger and larger numbers by militant student groups and new left factions who already knew how to fight riot police and were more than happy to treat San Rizuka as a front line against the state. And by 1968, things started to get very, very nasty. From April to July of that very same year, the Airport Corporation carried out real estate surveys of the land that residents had already agreed to give up. And even clashes over that broke out. And the pattern just kept repeating for years and years. The state would try to move one step forward, the resistance would make them move 2 steps back. And as the police would come in harder and harder, it would only harden the belief that this was an actual war. And naturally, the fights got a lot meaner and a lot filthier. On the protest side, especially among the militant student factions, they replaced banners and very angry speeches with stones, slingshots, bamboo spears, sickles, pipes, and the iconic helmet and club gear that became kind of a symbol in Japan. And of course, that wasn't enough, and Molotov cocktails were made and chucked directly at the police and construction vehicles. They even built fucking medieval walls and watchtowers, as well as trenches and tunnels, like they were preparing for a fucking siege. I mean, in a way, that was literally what was happening. But if you think all of that stopped at just deadly, blunt, or sharp objects and Molotov cocktails, well, of course it fucking didn't. The resistance took it one step further and started using literal fucking bioweapons like chloropyrene and raw sewage. Yeah, really, they weaponized liquefied shit. And all of that wasn't just for making the riot police uncomfortable and stinky, because chloropyrene can seriously fuck you up. It burns your skin, it makes breathing feel like hell, and it absolutely one-shots your eyes.
Yes, they went fucking hardcore with this because, well, bioweapons and chemical warfare are also go-to standard choices for commies.
So, the footage that you're seeing of police in full riot gear running from a bunch of farmers and students is because they were literally avoiding rocks, human shit, and extremely hazardous chemicals. And that is how most of the clashes actually looked. Not noble speeches or the occasional shove. It was like a literal fucking war zone. But the police didn't come in unprepared. They strapped the fuck up. Riot gear, tear gas, water cannons, even fucking bulldozers, cranes, and demolition crews.
Looking at modern UK, basically, yes. Present-day London or 1960s Japan, you decide.
Backing them up. And they just kept pushing and pushing. Barricades get smashed, towers were torn down, people were dragged out, beaten, and arrested. And the thing about a struggle like that is that once both sides fully commit to it, every single clash becomes practice for even worse ones. And that is exactly what happened in 1969. Even the closing ceremony of the old Imperial Farm turned into a full-on brawl because the protesters showed up and trashed the assembly hall. So naturally, the police tightened the screws even further afterwards. That very same year, union leader Isaku Tamura and 13 others were all arrested after occupying a road and stopping a bulldozer. And by 1970, the Airport Corporation moved towards full forced expropriation of the land that it still didn't secure. And of course, protesters were still clashing with the police and construction workers. Then, on September the 16th, 1971, came the Toho Crossroads incident, one of the most infamous days in the entire struggle.
And hello, welcome, milady, to the PVFS, as we are right here with this piece of Lady Death. This is the one that we're doing tonight, and also earlier, Ruby Hoove went and purchased this one, so we'll be shipping this one out tomorrow. Absolutely, positively great. So everybody, welcome in the PVFS and Anonymous, and hope they're both doing well as we've got this time to go on in here. Just a little bit of fun. Jesus, shit, coal and iron and fertilizer makes old school gunpowder. Yeah. And yes, well, this piece being beautiful, and yeah, the other one where now after I ship this out, I'm gonna go through my files again and look for every single pen and ink illustration of Miss, Lady Death, and go and put them up in the store in my pop culture illustrations category, like I did with all the Black Widow pieces a few weeks back that Ruby Hoove also went and got one of them. So Ruby Hoove is really coming in, showing a lot of great support. That is totally making this August the best August I have had in a long while. And, you know, because of me, you know, running my own show in life, now I don't have to worry about whatever I earn going over to, going to having to go and buy food for my father, even though he was supposed to be the one that bought all the food. But then, of course, you know, his gambling money, his sports betting addiction. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, that's, ouch.
It started during the second forced land seizure push near the Toho Crossroad, when the radical militants ambushed a police unit, where 3 police officers were beaten and burned to death. They captured police officers and set them on fucking fire. You could say that the protesters had crossed a line with that one, but you will be very happy to hear that it didn't end there. Because on October the 1st, the Central Youth Division figure, Fumio Sanomiya, really committed to the stereotype and committed suicide, leaving a note saying that he hated those that had brought the airport to this land and that he had lost the will to keep on fighting. So, after that, an additional clash happened that led to yet 3 more riot police being killed. And yet, somehow, after multiple deaths on both sides, it was far from over. In March of 1972, the protesters decided to just casually build a fucking 60-meter tall tower right in front of the runway to obstruct all of the flight tests. Yeah, really, 60 meters tall. It's really one of those details that sounds so fucking stupid that you assume it's exaggerated. But no, they really fucking did that. They built a giant steel middle finger right in front of the runway, and the state just had to sit there and fucking deal with it. And that is why this tower became one of the most iconic symbols of the entire struggle. It wasn't just useful for the protesters, it was humiliating for the airport and the riot police. And the funniest part to me is that they actually built it like a proper quality tower. It wasn't just some bullshit they flung together out of wood and scrap metal. It's a very well-built tower. It's been done completely professionally. Because, of course, even in the middle of mass riots, the Japanese perfectionist gene still kicks in. But the movement was still paying for every fight. After years of arrests, police pressure, forced land seizures, and people simply being too tired to fight on, the number of local farming families still in the Union crashed from around 320 to just 23 by 1976. So even while the resistance was still capable of doing absurd acts of chaos, the movement itself was being grinded down really hard. By 1977, the government was desperate to open the airport within the year. But the protesters were still capable of pulling massive numbers. And in April of 1977, they mobilized around 17,500 people for a giant rally, the biggest one in the struggle's history. They planned and coordinated like they were Romans sieging Gaul. And then...
Yes, the Japanese industrious spirit was still there even during these commie violent protests and riots going on for all these years. But yes, what Chaz wish they did, yes. But those people have the life skills and the industrious nature of your average fucking pothead. So, of course, they were incapable of anything.
They struck. Cue the music. Look, I just have to say it. Out of every single riot that I have ever seen, this one by far has the best fucking aesthetic. I mean, look at that fucking drip. There is a reason it became iconic. I mean, I would fucking wear that. And these guys were actually winning battles against the police by using actual military tactics, and they were prepared to die for what they believed in. Unlike most of those LARP fests that you get today, where people just want to virtue signal or steal a TV, who are in some cases knowingly fighting in favor of government oppression, whereas the Hantai Dome were actually fighting against government oppression. And more importantly, for their own homes and livelihoods. This, cringe, gay, LARPers, dumb, achieves nothing, no bitches, BPD, learn about the economy, then learn how to shave your fucking armpits. Now this, stylish, coordinated, literally killed police, actual military tactics, an actual fucking cause to get behind, gets bitches, built literal fucking siege engines, aura, Hugo Boss wept. But despite all of that effort...
Yes, all the more reason to despise the ground that Antifa and Black Lives Matter walk on.
The state finally decided to destroy the tower, realizing that letting the 60-meter tall fuck you tower standing in the runway's path was not a good long-term strategy. So, on May the 6th, 1977, around 2,100 riot police took control of the tower and the structure was demolished. But the clashes still kept on going, and just 2 days later, yet another large battle broke out, and one protester took a direct tear gas round straight to the head and died 2 days later. And just a day later after that, in an eye for an eye scenario, one police officer was also killed in a clash. And then, right before the airport was finally supposed to open in 1978, the protesters managed to pull out one more last hurrah. Because on March the 26th, 1978, several left-wing groups raided Narita's control tower and smashed all of the equipment inside. Yet again, delaying the airport's opening. That obviously didn't stop the airport.
Dang, history really does tend to repeat. Look at that bad people don't look. Yes, to bad people who don't pay attention. Cheech and Chong had the best bug-out vehicle. Yes. Yes. Japanese demonstrations go hardcore. In a way that shitheads at Chaz, those morons don't.
However, but it perfectly captured the fighting spirit of the entire struggle. After years of violence and deaths, there were still people willing to choose violence in the name of freedom. So, what did all of this add up to? Well, a lot of blood, for one. The exact total numbers vary, but by the late 70s, there had been dozens of major incidents, thousands of injuries and arrests, and multiple deaths on both sides. And after all of that, with nearly a decade of delays, the airport was still open. On May the 20th, 1978, the new Tokyo International Airport finally began operations. At that point, 17 farming households still remained on the land, 15 of them still belonging to the union. And the very last one of them was not evicted until 2023. Even though the airport opened, Sanrizuka didn't just wake up one day and go, oh shit, fair enough, let's all move on. A lot of farming families still refused to sell. Some still refused to leave, and Narita Airport ended up with one of the weirdest atmospheres of any major airport on Earth. To this day, you still have privately owned land sitting inside or right next to the airport. Like, actual farmland, crops and everything, with people still farming under the shadows of jets whizzing above them like it's some surreal joke about modernity devouring the peaceful farming lifestyle. Though in a very, very real sense. But the Hantai Dome didn't just disappear. Its influence shrank a lot, sure, and the riot years faded, but the resistance kept going, in the form of protests, memorializing, and lawsuits. So the fight just got quieter. Less helmets and clubs and more courts and arguments. But quieter does not mean gone. And that is what's fascinating to me, because when you hear a story like that, you imagine a clean ending. Airport open, roll credits, everybody go home. But that wasn't the case. I mean, by the 2020s, the number of farms was obviously tiny compared to the peak of the movement, but the fact that any are still there after the conflict started, about fucking 60 years later, well...
But yes, to be honest, this would only happen with a hive mind in the USA. Too many people have, too many ideas at once. It would never work here. Yes. The people hold the upper hand, but they, thought they have not. And also, you would have to say that with small town America, like this was a farming village. This was a farming community that had their history and had their traditions intact. And if you look at it, this could actually happen in America, where you get some farming community out there in one of the Midwestern states where now say they don't want their farmland being bought up by Bill Gates, because yes, Bill Gates is the biggest farmland owner in America. And say if there's actual farmers that are actually interested in their actual history of their community and maintaining it, and then you've got all this shit Bill Gates is doing with his creepy little global homo agenda, and the people who have their tradition instead of the modernity, and watch them get up and unite in a way that's going to most definitely lead to a lot of people getting killed, and then a lot of worthless, evil, degenerate drag queen freaks going on tour mocking their deaths. But again, remember, those are the same people that are either going to die slowly and painfully from some horrible disease, or from taking their own life because they had a nervous breakdown because they're not 25 anymore and nobody wants to fuck them, or they just wind up getting gunned down in cold blood by a Muslim.
Well, that's pretty fucking impressive. So Narita never really managed to bury its bloody history under a layer of concrete. And that is the real legacy of this story. A relatively small farming community backed by students managed to delay, embarrass, and physically alter one of the biggest pieces of infrastructure in the country, even if they didn't manage to stop it. And the conflict is still sort of going on to this day, just in a much more quiet way. Government says progress is needed, and then some farmer tells them to go fuck themselves. And that is what Narita Airport is today. A symbol of Japan's success built on top of one of the most fucked up domestic conflicts in its post-war history. It's clean, it's efficient, but it will always have some angry farmers and exiled families somewhere in the background, cock-blocking the entire thing with just dirt and spite. And let's be completely honest, the government deserves it.
Absolutely, positively. And also, don't forget about Soros as well. Oh, yes, for sure. And, you know, his that gangrenous vampire does have a son who's trying to carry on his father's legacy. But, you know, let's see President Vance go on in and vanquish that. Or don't forget about how we have those conservative leaders out there that are taking MAGA to other countries, like with Javier Milei, or the first female prime ministers of both Italy and Japan, both being the types that are going out of their way to tell mosques and other Islamic scum that want to gloat about marrying child brides to get the fuck out. Like what Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni did, where there was an Arab illegal who went on Italian TV to cheer on and publicly celebrate marrying children. So Prime Minister Meloni had him deported. Be great, and he should be grateful that he just simply got deported and not deported as a euphemism for being buried under the foundation of Giant Stadium or anything like that. And yes, Forever says, if I ever go to Japan, I will smile at seeing their airport. As well you should. Soros is pure evil as well. Yes, remember to that, you know, Bill Gates is still a rank amateur. And also, at least with Bill Gates, somebody did go and publicly fuck with him. If you saw that footage that happened in the 90s that they tried to repress for years, but now is all over the internet, of when Bill Gates got hit in the face with a pie. If you ever saw that. If you want to see the Bill Gates pie in the face, Gates looks like he's transitioning, and he's been looking like that for a while now. You know, if only the mugshot of him was something more recent involving his trips to Epstein Island. It's worth pointing out that the public acknowledgement of him having gone to Epstein Island, that happened, and it was only after that then his wife filed for divorce. And yes, I will show that. Well, first, let's give all a nice good look at our finished product right here with Lady Death. I think this Lady Death turned out really, really well. No, but then again, remember, it's not what I like, it's the consumer. You know, hence, out of the 3 pieces of Lady Death right here, whichever one was the one Ruby Hoove wanted to buy in super chat form, here we are. So she went and got this one. And hey, we still had a 2 out of 3, a very well done 2 out of 3. It's very nice. So yes, too legit to quit. Hello out there to PVFS with their applause, and also came out great. Well, that's very nice to hear. And of course, I will be putting this up in the store tomorrow. And yes, the 2 pieces, the Albedo pieces that our friend Teddy commissioned, have been shipped out today, along with some extras that I hope he'll enjoy. But let's go and conclude with a nice little bit of Bill Gates.
Police and security guards in Belgium were caught flat-footed.
Speaking of, shithead, here's Dan Rather, the one who was caught lying about W's military service and about his Air National Guard experience, and him outright reporting false hearsay about W. Bush, the draft dodger. Well, he got to retire with a full pension.
Today by a cowardly sneak attack on one.
Of course, calling it cowardly. Oh, fuck you. And if somebody put a pie in the face of Elon Musk, this same shithead or whatever would be in his place would be calling that person a brave hero who is speaking truth to a tyrant. Eat shit and take a long walk off a short bridge. Do that thing that people who have evidence on Bill and Hillary are constantly not doing, but you keep telling us the lie that they are doing it.
The world's wealthiest men. The target was Microsoft Chairman Bill Gates arriving for a meeting with community leaders. Watch what happens when a team of hitmen meet him first with a pie in the face.
Hitmen? No. As I said, with all those people that like to silence Bill and Hillary witnesses, they don't use pies. Unless they're willing to go and use pie with some kind of flesh-corroding acid in it, like the pies in the face of that one guard, the security guard in Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Yes, it's a pie. It's not that serious, Dan, rather. But because you're a little bitch for the media, and of course because Bill Gates wants to control the entire fucking universe, well, you'll oblige the obviously prefabricated little choice of words right there. What pie was that? Was it like a generic, just like whipped cream in a plate? Or was it banana cream? Maybe it was, well, it can't be a chocolate kind. Maybe it's key lime. It obviously can't be pecan or chocolate of any form. Key lime, maybe some kind of lemon pie. I don't know. I haven't been up to the East Detroit Bakery for a while, so what their pie selection is like, I can't tell you. But it's clearly some kind of cream. I'm just going to say banana cream, which is a type of pie I've never actually had, so I cannot say yay or nay whether or not I agree with that decision. Well, the PVFS enjoys it. It could be straight cream. And, anything being straight, considering all the social engineering that globalists like Bill Gates like to do, yeah, anything being straight most definitely would make them angry that still exists. Gotta love it. Yes, he got hit with a pie. And, well, trust me, his wife, or ex-wife, would definitely agree with us that he deserves worse. Yes, he's not worth the filling. The actual filling, no. Just, like those pies they were giving out in Revenge of the Nerds, where it's just a topless photo of the one cheerleader printed on the bottoms of the tin, and they just cover them with whipped cream and sell those.
Was momentarily and understandably shaken, but he was not injured. The hit squad piled on with two more pies before one of them was wrestled to the ground and arrested. The others, for at least the moment, got away.
Oh, they got another one. Another pie that went after him, and, well, there should have been more. All the pies, just all of them, just tossing them to make it look like he is on the service end of the extended ending to Doctor Strangelove that got cut from the film, and all that exists of it is either descriptions and a couple of stills of the ending going on where all the people in the war room would start hitting each other with pies. And then we get the nuclear war montage of, we'll meet again. Yes. Pie to the face. He really, really needs another pie to the face, pie to the face, pie to the face.
Gates went inside, wiped his face clean, and made no comment. He then went ahead with his scheduled meeting.
And whoever it was that did that, he went and had them fucking slaughtered. Whether he's one of those that wants to go and, has them abducted so that he can go and pull the trigger himself, or if he has other things to do and he'll just go and, call up his own personal Agent 47 to take them out, like, what Bill and Hillary do so much, well, then that wouldn't surprise me either. And yes, cheesecake as well would be a waste, so shaving foam, well, considering the health hazard that would be in ingesting that, just like the health hazard of ingesting all that artificial meat shit that, curiously, a man like Bill Gates is going out of the way to try to go and push in the press. Well, also, he is the most prolific farmland owner in America, and you see, barely reported details out there in the news that barely get brought to any mainstream outlets. So you have to go to alternative media outlets or go to local news sources to find them, of farmland burning all across America over the past decade or so. Yeah, maybe it would be the punishment fitting the crime, like a Tales from the Crypt twist ending, if pie to the face of shaving cream wound up getting him horribly ill from ingesting that shaving cream. Or as Robin Williams so succinctly said about him, oh, Monopoly is just a game, Senator. I'm trying to control the fucking world. It's all leading to information technology. Soon it'll be total information technology, tit. And when you're sucking on the tit, I've got you by the motherboard. And yes, those are actual brave heroes, not some tranny sociopath who was brainwashed by The Daily Show into killing Charlie Kirk. No, that's a fucking hero. There goes my hero. So until then, I want to thank you all for watching. Subscribe so the channel will reach 10,000 subs. Become a member today and shop my art store at the first link in the description, where you can buy my art or commission me or support me with a donation. Or you can go and pre-order issue 5 of my comic book Encrypted, where a regular copy is 5, an autographed copy is 10, an autographed and sketched in copy is 20, or you can get a 1-year subscription for 60, or 1-year subscription with your copies autographed for 90. So remember, tomorrow I'll have new shorts at 5 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 and 6. I'll have a new video at 6:30 and I'll be live again at 10. So until then, felines, slam it, lick it, suck it, and see you, Space Cowboy.